It started not with a bang, but with the quiet, sickening realization that someone else felt entitled to decide the fate of my property, even to the point of attempting to profit from it. I'd moved into the quiet suburban neighborhood seeking peace and a sense of community. I'd invested carefully, purchasing a home with a small attached garage where I planned to store some overflow items, seasonal decorations, old furniture I intended to refinish, boxes of sentimental items that didn't fit into the main house immediately. The HOA seemed reasonable on paper, standard covenants about lawn care, paint colors, and trash cans. I was happy to comply, eager to be a good neighbor and contribute positively to the community fabric. I kept my lawn tidy, my home well-maintained, and greeted everyone with a smile. I attended the first few HOA meetings, listening quietly, trying to understand the neighborhood dynamic. There was a dominant figure, a woman named Brenda who was the current HOA president. She spoke with an air of absolute authority, often interrupting others and dismissing questions she seemed to find inconvenient. At the time, I simply noted it as a personality quirk, a perhaps overly enthusiastic approach to community management. I had no idea her management would extend into outright theft and abuse of power. Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below, and if you believe homeowners should have rights, not be bullied by power-hungry neighbors. Hit that like button and subscribe for more. I'd stored the items in my garage while I unpacked the main house, a process that took longer than expected due to my work schedule. The garage, while attached, had a separate entrance and wasn't used for parking my car, which I kept in the driveway. It was essentially a private storage unit on my own property. I made sure the garage door was always kept closed and locked when I wasn't accessing it. There was nothing in the covenants about garage storage, only general clauses about maintaining property appearance and not having unsightly items visible from the street. My closed garage, on my private lot, seemed clearly outside the scope of their authority. I had even made a point of getting approval for a small, decorative fence section in my backyard just to show I was willing to work with the HOA, not against it. I was establishing a foundation of trust, believing the system worked if everyone acted in good faith. But what she discovered next would force her to choose between keeping the peace and defending her property rights. My life in the neighborhood began pleasantly enough. I was settling in, getting to know a few of my immediate neighbors. The house was a good investment, solid structure, decent yard, exactly what I'd been looking for to put down roots. My job allowed me to work remotely most days, which meant I was home a lot, observing the quiet rhythm of the street. I valued my privacy and the security of owning my own home. I saw the HOA as a mechanism to protect property values and ensure basic standards were met, a net positive in a community. Brenda, the president, lived a few doors down. From what I could see, she seemed to view the neighborhood as her personal domain. She was often seen patrolling the street, sometimes stopping to point out weeds in someone's flower bed or an overflowing recycling bin. It struck me as a bit overzealous, but not malicious at first. I smiled and waved when I saw her, maintaining a polite distance. I wanted a quiet life, not neighborhood drama. One afternoon, I overheard Brenda talking loudly on her phone while standing at the end of her driveway. She seemed to be giving instructions. No, those old boxes in Miller's garage, the ones by the back wall. They look like junk. Definitely an eyesore. I'm putting them in the yard sale. We need to clean up the neighborhood profile, you know? Get rid of the clutter. She paused, listening. Yes, I know it's his property, but it's my community yard sale, and those things are visible if the door is open, which it was last week when he was moving things. Clearly neglected. It's for the good of the neighborhood. I froze, listening. Miller? That was me. She was talking about the items in my closed, locked garage. The blatant disregard for my property rights was chilling. She felt entitled to access my private space and dispose of my belongings based on a fleeting glimpse in her personal opinion of their appearance. It was the first clear signal that Brenda's idea of HOA authority extended far beyond lawn height and paint colors. It extended onto my property, into my locked garage, and involved decisions about my possessions. This was not just overzealous, it was invasive and demonstrated a profound lack of respect for the fundamental concept of private property. My initial good faith and desire to be a compliant, peaceful resident began to feel naive. I knew instinctively that letting this go unchecked would only invite further boundary violations. This was more than just a nosy neighbor. This was someone attempting to exert control over my personal space and possessions under the guise of HOA authority. The foundation of trust one had tried to build felt instantly shattered. The following weekend arrived, bringing with it the neighborhood-wide yard sale Brenda had organized. I had initially planned to browse, perhaps find a few interesting items. Instead, a knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. After overhearing Brenda's conversation, I had double-checked the lock on my garage door, confirming it was secure. I told myself she couldn't possibly act on her words. But the casual entitlement in her voice had unsettled me deeply. On Saturday morning, I stepped out to get the paper and saw the signs directing people to the community yard sale, prominently featuring Brenda's address. A steady stream of cars began arriving. I decided to take a walk, telling myself I was just getting some exercise. As I approached Brenda's house, my breath hitched. Arranged on tables and blankets on her front lawn, mixed in with her own items, were boxes and pieces of furniture that looked disturbingly familiar. My old wooden rocking chair, the one I'd inherited from my grandmother. A distinctive green storage tote I used for Christmas decorations. A box of books I'd packed from my old apartment. My blood ran cold. She had actually done it. She had somehow accessed my locked garage and taken my belongings to sell them at her yard sale. The shock was immense, quickly followed by a wave of disbelief and then cold, hard anger. How dare she? How could she? This wasn't a misunderstanding about a rule. This was theft, plain and simple, compounded by a breathtaking level of arrogance and disrespect for my private property. My first instinct was a confused attempt to rationalize, to think there must be some mistake. Maybe they were similar items? But the rocking chair was unique, and the green tote was unmistakable. I stood across the street, frozen, watching strangers pick through my things. My hands started to tremble, not from fear, but from suppressed rage. I wanted to march over there and confront her, demand my items back, maybe even call the police on the spot. But the years of working in complex environments had taught me the value of a clear head and a strategic approach. Acting on raw emotion rarely led to the desired outcome when dealing with manipulative people. This wasn't just about retrieving my belongings. It was about shutting down Brenda's power trip and establishing that she could not violate my property rights with impunity. I retreated back to my house, my mind racing. The immediate priority was documentation. I grabbed my phone and went back out, walking casually past Brenda's yard sale, taking photos and a short video clip that clearly showed my rocking chair and the green tote among the items for sale. I noted the time and date. I also took photos of my garage door, showing it was closed and locked from the outside. How had she gotten in? Had she picked the lock? Used a spare key she shouldn't have? That was a secondary concern for now. The primary issue was her possession and attempted sale of my property. I returned home and immediately started researching. I pulled up the HOA covenants and bylaws again. I read them cover to cover, specifically looking for anything about storage, visible items, property access, or the HOA's right to seize or dispose of personal property. There was nothing, absolutely nothing, that gave the HOA or any board member the authority to enter a homeowner's private, locked garage, remove items, and sell them. This was clearly outside the scope of the HOA's purpose and powers. It was theft. My initial shock and disbelief solidified into a grim determination. Brenda hadn't just crossed a line, she had obliterated it. This was no longer a neighborly dispute. It was a criminal act and a severe abuse of any perceived authority. My small, initial defensive action, documenting the items and researching the rules, was just the beginning. I knew I had to proceed carefully, gathering every piece of evidence I could before making my next move. The feeling of vulnerability was strong, but it was quickly overshadowed by a growing resolve to protect my home and my rights. The tension in the neighborhood became palpable, at least to me, although Brenda seemed oblivious, basking in the perceived success of her yard sale. I spent the rest of the day observing and documenting. I saw several people purchase items, including things I recognized as mine. I discreetly took more photos, trying to capture transactions if possible, though I didn't want to make myself obvious. Brenda, meanwhile, was in her element, directing people, haggling prices, embodying the self-important neighborhood matriarch. She didn't look stressed or guilty. She looked proud of her cleanup effort. This confirmed my suspicion that she genuinely believed she had the right to do this, likely viewing my stored items as somehow violating her aesthetic standards for the community. It solidified the fact that reasoning with her directly was likely futile. She operated from a place of absolute, unfounded authority. The next phase was crucial, gathering irrefutable evidence. I reviewed the photos and videos I'd taken, making sure the timestamp and location data were embedded. I wrote a detailed timeline of events, starting from overhearing Brenda's conversation through discovering the items at the yard sale to the present moment. I listed every item I could identify as mine. I printed out the relevant sections of the HOA covenant showing the absence of any rule permitting her actions. I started to think about how she might have gotten into my garage. Was there an old key? Had I unknowingly left it unlocked recently? No, I was meticulous about locking it. Perhaps she had a master key from a previous owner or property manager. This line of thought led me to the possibility of unauthorized access being a separate, serious violation. I decided to add security cameras. I installed a discrete camera covering my garage door and driveway, linked to cloud storage. This would serve as a deterrent and provide irrefutable evidence of any future unauthorized access. The following week, I took the most important step. I consulted with a lawyer specializing in real estate and HOA law. I presented my evidence, the photos, video, timeline, and HOA documents. The lawyer listened carefully, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I explained how I discovered my belongings being sold at the HOA president's yard sale, his expression turned serious. This is well beyond the scope of typical HOA disputes, he stated grimly. This involves potential criminal acts, theft, and possibly trespass or breaking and entering, depending on how she gained access. It's also a clear violation of your property rights and likely a breach of her fiduciary duty as an HOA board member. He explained my rights in detail. An HOA cannot seize or sell personal property without a court order, which requires due process Brenda had completely bypassed. He advised me to file a police report immediately for theft. He also drafted a strongly worded cease and desist letter and a demand letter for the return of my property or compensation for items sold, addressed to Brenda personally and copied to the entire HOA board, whose contact information I had obtained from the publicly available HOA records. This letter would put everyone on notice and establish a formal legal challenge. As soon as Brenda received the letter, the pressure intensified. She didn't respond directly to me or my lawyer. Instead, the HOA management company, which was clearly under Brenda's sway, sent me a letter citing a previously unheard-of storage violation and threatening fines if I didn't remove all unsightly items from view, referencing the garage contents she had already stolen. The letter was vaguely worded, lacked specific covenant references, and gave an impossibly short deadline. It was a transparent attempt to retroactively justify her actions and intimidate me. It was also a clear procedural violation. Proper violation notices required specific details, cure periods, and usually a hearing option. I forwarded the letter to my lawyer, who added it to our growing file of evidence showing the HOA, under Brenda's direction, was engaging in harassment and retaliation. Brenda also started using social pressure. I noticed neighbors who had previously been friendly seemed hesitant, some avoiding eye contact. I later learned Brenda was spreading rumors that I was difficult, non-compliant, and storing hazardous waste in my garage, necessitating her proactive cleanup. This was Brenda's second micro-cameo showing her true colors, not just entitled, but willing to lie and manipulate the community to maintain her image and justify her actions. One neighbor, however, discreetly approached me. She had seen Brenda and another woman, who wasn't on the board, going into my garage a few days before the yard sale, using a key. This neighbor was uncomfortable with what she saw and Brenda's subsequent behavior. This witness was a godsend, providing crucial information about how Brenda gained unauthorized access. Armed with the lawyer's advice, the witness statement, and the mounting evidence, my resolve hardened completely. This wasn't just about some old furniture anymore. It was about Brenda believing she was above the law, above the HOA's own rules, and could violate personal property rights without consequence. I wasn't going to be intimidated. I was going to fight back, strategically and legally. I learned everything I could about HOA regulations in my state, the proper procedures for enforcing covenants, and the legal definitions of theft and trespass. I realized Brenda's actions were not only morally reprehensible but also legally actionable on multiple fronts. I began preparing for the next steps, knowing they would involve official channels that Brenda couldn't control. The discovery of the witness who saw Brenda entering my garage was the smoking gun. It provided the crucial missing piece, proof of unauthorized access, turning the theft from ambiguous "she claimed the items were abandoned outside," a lie, into clear-cut trespass and likely felony theft, depending on the value of the items taken. My lawyer was confident. He explained that gaining access to a locked building on someone's private property using a key obtained improperly, we suspected from a past board member or management company representative who shouldn't have had it, or even worse, a copied key, significantly elevated the seriousness of the crime. It wasn't just taking items, it was violating the sanctity of a private dwelling. With this definitive proof of trespass and theft, I gained significant legal leverage. My lawyer amended the demand letter to include these specifics and outline the potential criminal and civil charges Brenda could face, including punitive damages and legal costs. He also prepared a formal complaint to the state agency that oversaw HOAs, detailing Brenda's actions, the procedural violations by the HOA management company under her influence, the bogus violation notice, and requesting an investigation into the board's conduct and the management company's complicity. He also advised me to file the official police report immediately, providing them with all the evidence, including the witness statement. Brenda, isolated by her own actions and increasingly desperate, made a crucial mistake fueled by her overconfidence. She seemed to believe her position as HOA president shielded her from real consequences. She had faced no immediate repercussions from the board, who were either enabling her or too afraid of her to act, or the management company, who clearly took their marching orders from her. She saw my demand letter as a bluff and the police report as a mere formality she could talk her way out of. She even doubled down, telling neighbors I was making false accusations and that I was the one causing trouble by storing junk and now harassing her. She genuinely seemed to believe her narrative would win, that her authority in the neighborhood trumped facts, evidence, and the law. She didn't grasp that I wasn't playing neighborhood politics anymore. I was operating on a legal and procedural level she couldn't manipulate. My methodical preparation was about to pay off. The legal action was swift and strategic. My lawyer sent the revised demand letter via certified mail. I walked into the local police station with my detailed timeline, photos, video, copy of the HOA covenants, the bogus violation letter, and the witness information. I filed a comprehensive police report for theft and unauthorized entry/trespass. The officer listened intently, reviewed the evidence, and confirmed that taking items from a locked garage on private property was indeed theft and trespass, completely outside the scope of HOA authority. They assigned a detective to the case. Simultaneously, my lawyer filed the formal complaint with the state HOA oversight agency, requesting a full investigation into Brenda's conduct and the potential complicity of the HOA board and management company. The delivery of the certified letter and a visit from a police detective were the first cracks in Brenda's facade of control. The detective contacted her, requesting an interview about the missing items from my property. Brenda, accustomed to simply barking orders or sending intimidating letters, was suddenly facing actual law enforcement. Simultaneously, news of the police visit and the state complaint began to filter through the neighborhood. Undoubtedly fueled by the certified letter received by other board members and perhaps the witness speaking more openly now that official action was underway, Brenda's shock quickly turned to panic. She realized her actions had consequences she couldn't talk away or fine into submission. She cornered me as I was getting into my car one morning, visibly agitated. "You need to drop this. This is ridiculous. Those were abandoned items. The HOA has the right to keep the neighborhood tidy," she shrieked, her usual composed mask shattered. I calmly met her gaze. "Brenda," I said, my voice steady and quiet, "those were items from my locked garage on my private property. Taking them was theft. Entering my garage without permission was trespass. The police are involved now, and I have legal representation. All communication should go through my lawyer." I refused to engage further, getting in my car and driving away, leaving her fuming on the sidewalk. I maintained control, refusing to be drawn into her emotional outburst. The truth was now undeniable. Police were investigating Brenda for theft. A state agency was investigating the HOA. The other board members, suddenly facing potential liability for Brenda's actions and their own inaction, began distancing themselves from her. The neighbor who had seen Brenda entering my garage shared her story with others, dismantling Brenda's narrative of me being the problem. Brenda's desperation escalated. In a final, ill-conceived power play, she spotted me talking to the police detective who had come to my property to gather more details and see the point of entry on the garage. This was on my own property. In a fit of panic and misguided authority, Brenda marched over, pulling out her phone, and declared loudly, "I'm calling the police. You're harassing me. and he's trespassing. She was literally calling the police on me for standing on my own property and talking to a police officer she had brought onto the scene by her criminal actions. The detective calmly looked at Brenda, then back at me, and said, "Ma'am, this is his property, and I am here on official police business investigating a report against you." He then turned to Brenda and sternly advised her that making a false police report was a crime and that she should cease interfering with his investigation immediately. The look on Brenda's face was one of utter disbelief and dawning horror. Her ultimate attempt to wield her false authority by calling the police backfired spectacularly, exposing her desperation and lack of understanding of actual law enforcement versus HOA busybodying. The immediate aftermath was quiet but firm. The police investigation proceeded, gathering statements and examining the point of entry on my garage door, confirming it hadn't been forced, suggesting a key was used. My lawyer pursued the civil case for the value of the stolen items and damages. The HOA board, facing legal threats and the state investigation, held an emergency meeting. With the evidence mounting and the police involved, Brenda's power evaporated. The board voted to remove her as president and suspend her from the board pending the outcome of the investigations. The management company, clearly trying to protect itself, also began cooperating, providing records that shed light on Brenda's unilateral actions. Brenda faced not only the police investigation for theft but also the civil suit and the very real possibility of being permanently banned from any future role in the HOA. Not to mention the social consequences in a neighborhood where her abuse of power was now public knowledge. I recovered some of my items that hadn't been sold, and my lawyer negotiated compensation for the rest. My property now had visible security cameras and clear, no trespassing signs, establishing clear boundaries. The sense of violation lingered, but it was overlaid with a powerful feeling of vindication and security. I had stood up for my rights, followed the process, and the system, however slowly, had worked. There was no reconciliation with Brenda or those who had enabled her. That relationship was permanently broken, replaced by a clear understanding of boundaries. My home was truly mine again, secured not just by locks, but by the quiet strength of standing up to a bully. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed this story, give this video a like if you haven't already, and subscribe for more stories about standing up to HOA bullies.